financial disaster, and the conspiracy to nationalize assets. On Channelisk Andre, the story begins with shocking news for workers saving for their old age. The Democratic Party is pushing a bill to transform private individual retirement pensions into a state-managed fund. Immediately, anger and confusion have engulfed the community of policyholders as they clearly sense that their personal assets are facing a risk of disguised nationalization. According to the narrative, citizens currently voluntarily deduct a portion of their salaries to deposit into private pension funds to secure their lives after retirement. But this bill seeks to pull all that money from businesses into a single entity for the state to operate. This is not merely a change in management mechanism, it touches upon a deep-seated fear regarding the loss of control over one's own blood, sweat, and tears, viewing it as a step towards stripping away the right to private property in society. The fiercest resistance comes from the 2030 generation young adults who see their future and safety nets being seriously threatened. They suspect that the true purpose of the state wanting to seize this massive source of funds is not to generate profit for the people, but to use it as a tool to prop up the stock market and defend exchange rates. Analyzing the current economic context deeper, the administration is painting a picture of the Kospi Index reaching the 5,000-point mark, and to achieve that, they have used the National Pension Service to buy up large quantities of stocks. However, the core issue lies in the fact that at some point, the National Pension Service will have to sell stocks to pay pensions to the people. When that happens, who will buy this massive amount of stock to prevent a market collapse? The haunting answer is that this soon-to-be-established private pension fund will be turned into a sacrificial lamb to absorb that entire basket of stocks or be thrown into the battle to maintain currency value. The narrator looks back at the history of the current pension system, which has been in place since 2005, where businesses and individuals have the right to sign contracts with individual financial companies to choose safe investment methods. Although the average return over the past 5 years has only reached a modest 2.86% due to the priority on principal preservation, it brings absolute peace of mind. Yet, the government is using the excuse of low returns to justify the need to pull everything into a large fund to increase profitability. This argument was immediately debunked as a false generalization and sophistry because a large fund scale never equates to high returns. On the contrary, risk will increase exponentially. Ha Hyanak, an editorial writer for the Jongdong Ilbo, voiced harsh criticism, stating that this compulsion violates the freedom of investment choice and infringes upon basic property rights protected by the Constitution. The phrase, "I'll take care of my own retirement money," has become the common sentiment of the majority of people at this time. The anxiety is not baseless, as the story cites a painful lesson from the AIJ scandal in Japan, where a trustee entity caused 200 billion won in pension funds to evaporate due to poor investment and concealment of losses, leaving 880,000 workers with nothing for their old age. This detail serves as a stern warning about the separation between the investment decision-maker and the beneficiary, leading to irresponsibility when failure occurs. Furthermore, the obsession with the current National Pension Service remains, as the government treats it like a personal slush fund for political and policy intervention. Opponents argue that concentrating resources into a single fund will increase systemic risk, where just one wrong decision by the administration is enough to sink the retirement lives of millions. The connection to Lee Jae-myung is clearly pointed out, as he once instructed a review to expand the proportion of domestic stock investments by the National Pension Service. Reality shows that the Kospi Index's rise is largely due to cash flow from this fund pouring into buy large cap stocks like Samsung Electronics or Hynix. Not stopping at stocks, foreign exchange authorities also mobilized this fund to sell dollars to curb the exchange rate hike late last year. But the effectiveness did not last long, and the result was that the fund burned money in vain. Mistrust in the government has reached its peak as people believe the new private pension fund will be used to offload assets for the National Pension Service when liquidity is needed, or to buy government bonds to cover budget deficits. Statistics show that the scale of private pension funds at the end of last year was over 343 trillion won and is expected to balloon to 1,172 trillion won by 2040. With the government continuously issuing debt bonds to spend, seizing this money source to force bond purchases is a completely plausible scenario. Song Eun-seok, a representative of the opposition, called this centralized mindset of managing people's private assets extremely totalitarian and dangerous. He emphasized that retirement money is the private property of citizens, not the states, to be used arbitrarily for political purposes like exchange rate defense. The peak of suspicion arose with the discovery of clauses in contracts from Kakao Pay Securities and Myre Asset Securities allowing the automatic forced sale of investors' foreign stocks. This detail makes people shudder at the prospect of the government rudely intervening in personal assets to protect the exchange rate regardless of the damage to the people, pushing the economy to slide towards a subsidized socialist model where private property rights are erased. Based on these sharp analyses and alarming data, I predict that if this bill is passed, the South Korean financial market will witness a massive capital flight. People, fearing the loss of their money, will find every way to withdraw funds early or move to other shelters like gold or cryptocurrency, leading to the collapse of the current liquidity system. The government under Lee Jae-myung will continue to use the newly appropriated capital to pump up the stock market, creating an artificial asset bubble to cover up weaknesses in economic management. However, when the bubble bursts and investment losses mount, the debt burden will fall on the shoulders of workers, forcing the future generation to face an impoverished old age. This will be the beginning of a deep crisis of political confidence that could lead to the collapse of the current administration. This story is an urgent warning bell about the fragility of private property rights in the face of the controlling ambitions of state power. It poses a life or death question. Should we entrust our future to short-term political calculations? What do you think about the state wanting to manage your retirement money? Is this protection or an open robbery? Please leave a comment below for us to discuss. And don't forget to follow channel ESQ Andre to update on the next gritty analyses.